Wait for advise that we're online. We're good? Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'll call to order this special meeting of council for Tuesday, February 28th, 2023. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are gathered in the heart of Treaty 7 territory in southern Alberta. And in this spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge and appreciate that we live, work, and play in the traditional territories and the home of the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, comprised of the Bears Paw, Goodstoney, and Chiniki bands, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Blackfoot Confederacy, consisting of Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani First Nations. This is also the traditional territory of the Métis Region 3. The town of Canmore is committed to working to live in right relations and to advance truth and reconciliation as we acknowledge the many Indigenous peoples whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. I'm grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. As we are all treaty people, we each have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor all life. Turning to the agenda, there's a couple of additions. And administration can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the additions is K1, Cougar Creek contract negotiations. The other addition is H1, potential new heliport in the NB of Bighorn. And so I will move that we approve the agenda for February 28th, 2023 special meeting of council as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. All right, so we will move first to item B1, and we're going to have a public hearing. I'm just going to pull up the right one here. For Bylaw 2022-24. This is the General Industrial District. So I call to order the public hearing for Bylaw 2022-24. The purpose of this bylaw is to expand the consideration of office developments within the General Industrial District, IND2 district, to all properties within that district in the Elk Run industrial area. The public hearing will proceed as follows. After I provide this introduction, administration will provide a summary of the matter under consideration to set a context for the hearing. Council will have opportunity to ask questions of administration after their presentation. Then I will invite members of the public to speak. There will be an opportunity for council to ask questions of clarification after each speaker presents. Once anyone present who wishes to speak has done so, the municipal clerk will provide the names of those who provided written submissions. Then council will again have opportunity to ask questions of administration before the public hearing is closed. And with that, let's move to the administrative presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. As mentioned, I'm here to present Bylaw 2022-24, which is a land use bylaw amendment specifically related to offices within the IND2 or General Industrial District. On your screen is a list of the IND2 district discretionary uses. You will notice highlighted is offices above the ground floor, east of Elk Run Boulevard only. The amendment that we're discussing here today is to delete east of Elk Run Boulevard only from the office use, leaving only office above the ground floor. The second amendment is section 5.3.5.4 within the IND2 district, which also has the same wording, and therefore, and shall be located east of Elk Run Boulevard only, is also proposed to be deleted from this section. This amendment is to allow for the consideration of office developments in the IND2 district. Therefore, it is important to understand what an office is. For reference, office is defined in the land use bylaw as follows. Office means a facility primarily for the provision of professional, management, administrative, or consulting services. So typical businesses include professional services such as law, accounting, engineering, and other consulting firms. For context, again, of where this amendment will apply within the town of Canmore. This map shows all properties that are currently designated IND2. There are two separate IND2 areas, one located east of Elk Run Boulevard and the other located west of Elk Run Boulevard. The IND2 district currently allows for offices to be considered above the ground floor on properties located east of Elk Run Boulevard only. This area is indicated in green. This means offices cannot be considered on properties located west of Elk Run Boulevard, which is the area indicated in red. The purpose of this amendment is to change the IND2 district to allow offices above the ground floor to be considered on all IND2 properties. That's both east and west of Elk Run Boulevard. For reference, there are currently 23 IND2 parcels located west of Elk Run Boulevard and 20 parcels located east of Elk Run Boulevard. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Weldon.
Yeah.
Looking to council to see if there are any questions. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now looking to the masses gathered, is there anyone here that would like to make a presentation or submission with respect to this matter? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask again just in case. All right. Okay, no, you have to register in order to be virtual. All right, so I will then look to municipal clerk. Are there any written submissions?
We have received none.
Great, thank you. Okay, so with that, no submissions, no questions, I will now close this public hearing. We'll now move to item B2. And I call to order the public hearing of Bylaw 2022-07. The purpose of this bylaw is to rezone the upper section of the staircase lands to future development. As I explained for the first public hearing, after this introduction, there'll be a presentation, this time from the town solicitor, to provide a summary of the matter under consideration. Council will then have opportunity to ask questions. I'll then invite members of the public to speak. There'll be an opportunity for council to ask questions of clarification after each speaker presents. And after everyone who is present that wishes to speak has done so, the municipal clerk will provide the names of those who have provided written submissions. Then we'll once again have an opportunity to ask questions of the town solicitor. And so with that, let's move to the town solicitor's presentation. Mr. Driedzik. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I will lead this presentation on behalf of the municipal administration, and the clerk's office is going to help me by showing one slide to help identify the lands that we're speaking about here. The staircase lands are called that because of their shape on the map. That's an informal name that gets used. The map in the bylaw application package will show the upper triangle highlighted as the area that's proposed to be rezoned from natural park to future development. The map that I have up on the screen for you shows you that this is all one parcel of private land, of which the upper triangle is currently zoned natural park district. There's some things here that are similar to any bylaw hearing, and there's some things that are different. In terms of similarity, we're recommending that following the hearing that council give second and third reading to the bylaw. The things that are different here, in a sense, is that this is an administration-led bylaw application. I'm basically representing the applicant, being the town, in an application to itself. The administration is the one that's currently recommending the rezoning. The background here is that there is a court order ordering the town to commence proceedings to either acquire this upper triangle of the staircase lands or redesignate these lands to future development district. Council has currently resolved to redesignate the lands to future development district as the means to comply with the court order, and that redesignation requires an amendment to the land use bylaw through the process provided by the MGA. Some background on the legal context here. This court order was issued under Section 644 of the Municipal Government Act that concerns the acquisition of land designated for public use. So this is different from the litigation concerning the NRCB decision and Section 619 of the Municipal Government Act. It involves the same parties, but this is an entirely separate matter. So when administration first reported to council on the options to either acquire the lands or redesignate, council had resolved to acquire. We reported back as the administration on having made an offer, having had that offer been declined by the landowner, and returning for a further resolution advising council that expropriation would be required to acquire these lands, recommending a resolution for that. Council at that point deliberated the options and resolved to proceed with the redesignation proceedings, the bylaw application. And like any bylaw application, we require a council decision to amend a land use bylaw, and that council decision requires a public hearing before second reading. And that public hearing will involve representations from persons who are either affected or who council chooses to hear from. Here's where I see some of the questions arising. One is that, like any bylaw application, councillors are required to have an open mind, capable of being persuaded. That does not prevent councillors from having a position on the issues or the desired outcome in advance, so long as they're not so fixed in their mind that nothing could move them. I'm fully confident that all councillors on the panel do have an open mind because of the deliberations that have occurred to date. Council has looked at both options, made resolutions in favor of both options, and I'm certain would love to consider further options if possible. Therein lies the next issue, which is discretion. Under the MGA, at a bylaw hearing, council can pass the bylaw, they could make amendments to the bylaw, or they could defeat the bylaw. Not all of those things will enable the town to comply with the court order. As is the case under the MGA, there are limits on what municipalities can do in the field of land use zoning, and in this particular case, Section 644 of the MGA and the court order has said commence proceedings to acquire the land or redesignate it to future development. So those are effectively the two options. Commence proceedings is going to require expropriation, and redesignation will need to be to future development for the purpose of complying with the court order. That does not prevent council from hearing from persons and considering those views, but in terms of the administration's request, we are entirely dependent on town council to keep the municipal corporation in compliance with the court order by doing one of those two things. So that is my request to you. We are recommending rezoning based on the resolution in place. If council was to decide that expropriation was the best means to comply with the court order, that resolution should really be made immediately. The previous staff report does contemplate the idea of postponing a second or third reading of the bylaw if necessary to further consider those options, but we would recommend no later than March of 2023 to conclude these redesignation proceedings or move to expropriate. And in any event, I would recommend that council not defeat this bylaw application without having resolved to expropriate at the same time. Because if that were to occur, the town would fall out of compliance with the court order by having neither of those two options in place. So I would request that one of those things be moving at all times here. So subject to any questions from council, that's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Dudzik. Looking to council to see if there are any questions. Seeing none, thank you very much. I'll now look to see if there's anybody who would like to make a public verbal submission at this public hearing. Mr. Borrowman, welcome back to council.
Thank you so much.
I think you're familiar with the clock.
You could just turn that off if you don't mind. There you go, perfect.
Okay.
Really was
That's about right. Okay. Thank you for appearing today. And of course, we know your name, and I understand that you're appearing on behalf of Rocky Mountain Heritage
Right,
Foundation.
you are.
Great. Please proceed.
All right, just before the clock starts, I have to say it's a rare treat to have to get out of bed early in the morning to come to this room for 9 o'clock. I mean, good heavens. I didn't get to lay in bed and drink my tea and read the news and all that. And I will remind Mayor Krausert that when I sat there, I was always very liberal with the timing of public presentations.
I'm sure that you'll receive the same as long as you don't start repeating yourself.
I'll try not to.
All right.
And as you noted, I am here today speaking on behalf of the Rocky Mountain Heritage Foundation. And we're here to take a neutral position on the question. I'd like to give a very brief overview of the history that led to the creation of the Rocky Mountain Heritage Foundation and the ensuing 20-year partnership between the foundation and the town to acquire and then protect the Quarry Lake lands for future generations. It's in this context that we would ask council to consider the motion to rezone a portion of the staircase lands. And for context, the Quarry Lake lands include approximately 225 acres immediately south of the Rundle Forebay lands and west of the staircase lands. It's important to note that the staircase lands are entirely contiguous to the Quarry Lake lands. So we're direct neighbors. The foundation and the town as co-owners of the Quarry Lake lands are direct neighbors of the staircase lands. In May of 1996, a local developer who is not at all involved in property development at this time, and in fact never really was interested in acquiring and rezoning the provincially owned lands around the quarry to develop. The public opposition was significant, and community members indicated clearly at that time that it was their desire that the land be protected in the long term for public recreational use. Most importantly, there was a very strong opposition to development adjacent to what had been traditionally considered the community swimming hole. In response to this public outcry, the town of Canmore then leased the Quarry Lake lands from the province. It was at this time, and in response to the concerns voiced by the community, that Stan Milner, a strong community benefactor and philanthropist and well-respected corporate leader in the province, became involved in the discussions. Mr. Milner, who had a home in Canmore, worked with the town council, the Canmore community, and other Alberta corporate leaders to create the Quarry Lake Heritage Foundation, which became later the Rocky Mountain Heritage Foundation. the province elected to sell the Quarry Lake lands to the Foundation and the town of Canmore on the basis of equal and joint ownership of the lands. Now, some of the purposes of the Foundation, as were noted in a letter of agreement from March 2001, signed by both Mr. Milner as well as Mayor Ron Casey, are to, so these are some of the purposes: acquire, preserve, protect, and enhance lands designated by the town of Canmore for the use of future generations, to assist in the beautification for public use and enjoyment of the lake located near Canmore, Alberta, known as Quarry Lake, together with the surrounding 225 acres of land, to develop the land surrounding the lake into a public park in a manner and to the extent desired by the Foundation and the town as joint owners, and meet environmental and conservation requirements in doing so. And this final bullet point is germane these days. The final purpose of the Foundation was to consider acquiring additional lands and indirect structures thereon by purchase or otherwise for social and community purposes as required. And it's in the spirit of this last point that today's board of the Rocky Mountain Heritage Foundation are speaking in a neutral manner to the motion that is before council, the proposed rezoning of the portion of the staircase lands as detailed within the motion. We would encourage council, as you consider and debate the motion before you, to have in mind the nature and purpose of the relationship between the town and Rocky Mountain Heritage Foundation, and have in mind the principle of preserving the Quarry Lake lands for the perpetual benefit of our community members and our visitors.
You can keep going.
Thank you.
Keep going.
No, I nailed it.
Yeah, right on.
I nailed it.
Very good. Well,
One learns how many words one can speak in 5 minutes over the years.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Just to clarify then, when the Quarry Lake lands came into the ownership of the town and the foundation, that was basically a transfer from the Crown then? It wasn't from private hands?
That's right. The lands at the time were provincially owned.
Yeah.
And as I noted, there was some discussion earlier between a local business person and the province to lease those lands for development, which is when all of this kicked off.
Right.
So yeah, then the province, the foundation approached the province and worked with the province to acquire the lands outright on behalf of the foundation and the town, and the province did that, and they sold the lands on the basis of a perpetual 50% ownership relationship between the town and the foundation.
And might there be an interest in the foundation pursuing those lands in the future, the lands in question?
That's not out of the question. You know, the future goals of the foundation are to expand the land base that the foundation manages in for the community in the sense of permanent recreational or conservation, environmental conservation values. So right now, as council will know, the foundation is in a rebuilding mode. Very small board right now. We have to complete some bit of work that we're doing with the town in regards to the MOU. And then the foundation will be recruiting a much larger and dynamic board, and beginning to consider what the foundation might be able to do in future years in the sense of, as I say, preserving lands in the community for conservation and recreational purposes.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions of Mr. Borman? Seeing none, thank you very much for appearing today, and thank you for your work on behalf of the Rocky Mountain Heritage Foundation.
Thank you, and I should mention the two other board members who aren't with me, Peter
Actually,
Musial,
Peter's here. He snuck in.
Oh, you made it.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
And Jody Hilty, who's the third board member, and as you know, is the grand poobah of Y to Y. I can never think of her title, but
Great.
so
Thank you. Thank you. So before looking to see who else might want to speak, as you've seen, we will be using a clock to ensure that we keep the presentations timely. You should also be aware that should you wish to speak, you will appear on the live web stream of this hearing, and that recording of this web stream is published online. And while you are speaking, we ask that you direct your comments to council and limit your comments to the subject of the public hearing. So with that, looking to see if anybody else would like to speak, either for, against, or in a neutral fashion with regards to this item. Seeing none, I will then turn to the clerk and ask that you read out the written submissions that we've received.
Thank you. So we received 8 submissions in opposition, and they were from Caroline Cousins-Mackey, Janine Guys-Davis, Leslie Herring, Jessica Carpat, Dwayne Kohut, Jeff Laidlaw, Carol Poland, and Graham Williams. Oh, sorry, that was a mistake. Jessica Carpat is not opposed. She is in favor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
that. Yeah. That would have been quite surprising otherwise. All right, so look to council if you have any other questions of our town solicitor at this point, having heard the public submissions and we've read the written submissions. All right, seeing none, I will then close this public hearing. We'll now move on to consideration of these matters. First of all, to G1, the land use bylaw amendment, and there's a typo there. It's 2022-24, General Industrial District. Mr. Weldon, you don't need to make a presentation again. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, Mayor Cosart, nothing to add, just other than administration's recommendation, and our recommendation is that council give second and third reading to this bylaw.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I will then move that council gives second reading to revised land use bylaw amendment 2022-24, General Industrial District, IND 2. Speaking to this motion, I think it makes a lot of sense to have the same rules applying to both sides of Elk Run in this area, and I have no concerns with making that change. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Graham.
Sorry.
No? Okay, Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Cosart. I will be voting in favor of this bylaw for similar reasons. The Industrial 2 West and Industrial 2 East have a lot of the same uses, and I think that office on the second floor in the west side is an appropriate use given the adjacent uses in that area, and that it is currently a permitted or a use that's allowed in the eastern portion. So I think it kind of brings that area more in line with each other, and they have a very similar zoning. So that's why I will be in favor of this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hillstad.
I will also be in favor of this motion. This just makes the the area actually consistent with itself. So, and all the other reasons already stated, so.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll also be voting in favor. I think consistency here for the zoning is helpful. Talking with various business owners, commercial space is a challenge in the community right now, and so to open up this application to allow office space would be helpful for those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mera.
Thank you, Mayor Crowsert. I too will be voting in favor of this motion. I agree with everything that's been said. It just makes sense, and I know a lot of people have been looking for commercial space that's just for offices, so that may not need to be in areas that have high traffic. So this is just makes sense to bring everything together.
Great. Thank you. And I should note, even though it was not submitted as part of the public hearing, as part of the stakeholder engagement, administration reported that there was a canvassing of the owners west of Elk Run Boulevard, and there was submitted 9 letters of support for the amendment. So, okay, with that then, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that Council give third reading to the revised land use bylaw amendment 2022-24, General Industrial District IND-2. Any further comments with regards to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to the Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2022-07, Staircase Lands. I don't think we needed a presentation. The town solicitor has already encouraged that Council adopt one of the 2 requirements under the court order, and that it's imperative that we don't defeat one without putting the other one in place, so as to not be in contempt of the order. So I will move that Council gives second reading to Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2022-07, Staircase Lands. And in speaking in favor of this motion, I just want to reiterate the very atypical circumstances that we have in dealing with a land use issue. We are subject to a court order. That court order requires us to do one of 2 things: acquire the land or to rezone it. Before taking a look at those 2, we should make sure that we understand that this court order is pursuant to Section 644 of the Municipal Government Act. And that basically is in layman's terms, says if there's some private land and you take away any potential use by the owner to make it a public use area, you have in fact expropriated the land, and you have to make right by either purchasing it or rezoning it. And so that's where the town was found to be at fault, is that these lands are privately owned. And with the last major land use bylaw amendments, there was a zoning applied that, while very, very similar with the past, was in fact a new zoning, and therefore it gave rise to this application. As was evidenced by our decision in the first instance, it certainly recognize what I believe is my preference, and that's that this land remain natural park. And so that's why we ordered acquiring it and to report back to council with details. Now, unfortunately, there's no willing seller in this regard. An offer was made based on an appraisal that was done by the town, and it was refused without any counter offer being provided. There was some indication that the amount offered was multiple times lower than would be accepted. This automatically puts us into, if it's to be acquired, an expropriation situation. We received advice, and based on the estimated costs of an expropriation, which can vary depending on if and when some sort of an arrangement is reached with the owner, it would result in costs being paid by the town in many multiples of what we believe the land is worth. That also includes covering the costs of the owner's legal costs in that as well. So that's when council came to the understanding that in fact it was cost prohibitive, it would not be in the fiscal responsibility of the community, and in fact, given that the lower two stairs in the staircase lands are future development zoned, it actually wouldn't resolve the problem that we were concerned with, and that's protecting those lands. Thus, the decision to change course and pursue rezoning to future development. I don't like that we have to do this. I don't like it at all. I believe that the zoning that we had in place was the one that is the best use of those lands, but I do recognize the legal conundrum that we're in, and I certainly respect the order of the court, and as having a fiduciary responsibility to the corporation of the town of Canmore to make sure that we are always on side with our legal requirements, I will be supporting this motion in order to give effect to the order. And Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Crowsert. A lot of what you had said rings very true for me. I think it's really important that we recognize the court order that we are under and we have to abide by, and that council has gone through an incredibly thorough process to consider both potential options in front of us. At the end of the day, acquiring this one tiny triangle of land, I do not believe would actually address the concerns raised by the community and the outcomes that were expressed by former Mayor Borrowman on behalf of the Rocky Mountain Heritage Foundation of long-term conservation of that area, because there would still remain privately held land zoned for future development. And I think it's important to remember that future development is defined as land that is potentially suited to future urban uses. It's not a guarantee. And I think in the vision that I have for the future of this space is that it would be most appropriate and outcomes that benefit everyone involved for a potential third party to be acquiring this land from the current owners and bringing in those values of conservation and natural park uses that are adjacent to it currently. I think for us to go through the exercise of expropriation isn't fiscally in the cards for me as a councillor at this point in time, given that expropriation would be the process we have to go through. And so I will be voting in favor of this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Hillstad.
I could simply say ditto. I won't. But basically both Mayor Crowsert and Councillor Faubert have made very good points. Those are many of the reasons that I will also be supporting this land use change. Again, this does make the rest of the staircase lands consistent with what they already have in the future development district. Getting a little more into that district, currently the permitted uses is a public utility, and then there's discretionary uses of accessory building, agriculture intensive, athletic and recreational facility outdoor, campground, open space, public building. So currently we'd call it probably open space. And so there's not a lot that they can do on it at this time. So going to future development, making the whole staircase lands consistent, again, I don't think it's fiscally responsible either to try to expropriate a portion of that land. So sometimes you have to look at the other options, and yes, it might not be the preferred option, but at this point, I think it is the right option. And again, as Councillor Faubert pointed out, possibly a third party could come and they could make an offer that is more conducive to being accepted by the landowners. So at this time, I think the right decision is to give the rezoning as recommended.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. That was very well said by prior councillors. In the beginning, I was very motivated to make an offer to purchase these lands, but as the situation has unfolded, there just comes a point where, from a fiscal perspective, the juice is not worth the squeeze, and it would be irresponsible. Further to that, too, just because this land will be redesignated to FD, future development, as Councillor Faubert so correctly stated, that doesn't mean it's guaranteed development, and the uses of this land, as Councillor Hillstad has noted, are discretionary and limited to quite a degree, and the lands are quite flawed in terms of potential. There's a highway right beside it, there's significant undermining, it is not a slam dunk easy thing to change. And so I would invite the community, keep a close eye on what happens with these lands in the future. Hopefully a third party or some other mechanism comes forth where perhaps these lands can be brought back towards a park usage for the entire enjoyment of the community, and so I will be reluctantly approving.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mara.
Thank you. I too will be voting in favor of this motion. I do echo everything that's already been said. I know we would like to acquire these lands and have a natural park for our community. But in the end, it comes down to fiscal responsibility, and I do like the idea of a third party, and maybe even a third party jointly done that can join with the Rocky Mountain Foundation and come up with something creative and innovative. So hopefully we have maybe 3 willing partners even in this part of the land. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
I too will be reluctantly supporting this one for all of the reasons that you all eloquently spoke to. This is potential future development. We went through a very thorough process to get here. I feel that that process has its flaws, that it's unfortunate that we're here, but here we are. And we will all make decisions we don't want to make while sitting at this table, and we're about to make one. I thank you all for the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor. And just before I call the vote, just to close out the discussion around future development, potential future development. If a landowner under future development wanted to bring an application for a discretionary use, of course, it would go through the usual processes, which involves notice and the opportunity for feedback and comments to be provided at that time from the public. If a landowner wanted to rezone them, then that would involve a change to the land use bylaw, which would necessarily require a public hearing as well. And so should there be any use of these lands, there will be opportunity for public feedback. And as Councillor Ma said, I think it's important that the public keep an eye on this one. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now I will move that Council give third reading to the Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2022-07 Staircase Lands. Anyone wishing to make further comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to item H1, new business. And this one is having to do with the potential new heliport in the MD of Bighorn. It's come to all of our attention and the community's attention that there is a party that's talking with the province about use of some land right at the bottom of Elk Run Boulevard on the other side of 1A across from the RCMP for the purposes of a heliport. Now, we already have a problem with regards to helicopter usage, which was addressed by the previous council at the current heliport situation by negotiating mitigations and achieving what I believe would be a maximum amount of helicopter usage in the area, and that the town residents could look at that and have expectations firmly set that that would be a maximum. And there was also discussion at that time about even relocating that heliport, which is not something that couldn't be revisited in the future, should there be another suitable location. So when we learned that there is discussions about a new heliport, not in our jurisdiction, but in our neighboring jurisdiction, it of course causes concern given our history. And this heliport, as I understand it, is looking to attract bus tours and be very, very busy. And the reason that they are not going to the current heliport is because of the maximums already in place. So there are thousands of residents living within a very short distance of the proposed location. There are businesses, including the Alpine Club with horses and dog sled businesses that will potentially be quite disrupted, and the lives of our residents disrupted. And so I believe that the town of Canmore is an interested party, given that we're right across the street from what is potentially a majorly disruptive operation that will adversely impact our community. So I propose, and I'll be bringing in a motion shortly, that I am authorized to advocate on behalf of the town of Canmore with regards to the processes that will follow with both the province of Alberta, and if the province of Alberta approves this usage, then with the MD of Bighorn, so that the town's interests can be heard and considered. Of course, I'm seeking a good neighbor response, just as I would expect the town of Canmore would provide if the circumstances were reversed. So that's the context. And so the motion that I'm putting on the table is that the mayor is directed to voice concerns to the MD of Bighorn and the province of Alberta with respect to locating any new heliport in close proximity to the town of Canmore. And just speaking further to that, I can advise that in preparing to bring this motion today, I have been in touch with MLA Rosen, who understandably has also been receiving a lot of feedback, and she thought it was quite expected that the town of Canmore would have something to say. I also had a good conversation last night with Reeve Roswald, and she underlined that this is not an MD process right now. This is a business seeking to obtain use of Crown land, and so it's a provincial discussion right now. And she confirmed with me that should the province agree to that usage, then it would be subject to a municipal District of Bighorn land application procedure and going through their municipal planning commission. I was quite surprised, as was Reeve Roswald, when looking into this matter, that land within the MD is zoned for recreation use, including a runway. So I think that we are getting involved, if you support this motion, at the right time to voice our concerns right at the start, and that we are in a good position to do so. So I would ask for your support for this motion. And once again, and I don't know if you have it ready to go on the screen, Municipal Clerks. Great. Thank you. There it is. So that council direct me to voice concerns to the MD of Bighorn and the province with respect to locating any new heliport in close proximity to the town. So, speaking to that motion, Councillor Hillstad.
I will fully support this motion. I do believe that the province did reach out to administration to get feedback, and I believe that feedback has been provided. Also, the Heliport Committee was reached out to by admin, and I know the public members got together and they drafted a response as well, and it was a very well thought out response, and that has also been submitted. I think this just adds to the process, and I believe that we should definitely do this to, again, there's many potential issues that could happen here just with having two heliports in such close proximity, and just there's a lot of things where it's located and things like that. So this is great timing, and I fully support it.
Thank you. Councillor Faubert.
Yes, I want to thank Mayor Krausert for bringing forward this item for the agenda today. I think it is vitally important that we speak on behalf of our community to the province and the MD on this issue, which has just recently arisen. I also think it's important that we reflect upon a lot of the work that we have been doing with respect to regenerative tourism in the community and sustainable tourism, and that the type of visitor experiences and the carbon footprint that they have, we need to be, and the effect that that has on the quality of life of the residents of our community are all things that need to be considered whenever an application for a visitor experience like this is being looked into. Especially, it's adjacent to our community, but in terms of location, it's practically in our community. And I think that is not a difference that most people will make in terms of a boundary line and understanding the different jurisdictions. So getting involved and having a voice in this process at the provincial level to start for the leasehold, I absolutely support, and I thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Merrow.
I too would like to thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's always good to be involved right from the start instead of reactive when it's already in place or moved forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Graham.
A question, if I may.
Yeah.
Does the aviation is a federal jurisdiction, is it not? Yep. Should there be conversations with the federal governments in regards to this as well, or is that not yet in this process? I don't.
You know, it's. I was actually talking with Reeve Roswald about that as well, and she believed that there is some federal involvement as well. And it was after I drafted this motion. And so I'd be open to a friendly amendment to the MD of Bighorn, the province of Alberta, and the government of Canada with respect to locating any heliport in the close proximity. Okay.
I would like to make that friendly amendment for you. Thank you very much for considering.
Thank you for suggesting that, and I will accept that friendly amendment. Ms. Smithers, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I
Okay.
think you touched on it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is a very timely thing to do. I think the foresight is very helpful for the community. There are significant ramifications here. Additionally, with our town's reconciliation efforts, I know we are in a gradual process of some lands quite close to there at Indian Flats that could be deemed over time with our Nakota neighbors as ceremonial ground that they could use. And I think it's behooving to us to try and preserve the best setting that we can for that moving forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So you now have the wording of the revised motion in front of you, and I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you for your support for that. We're now going to be going to our in-camera item. Now, I would note that, in fact, we will, when we go in camera, after I make the motion, we will be coming out, and I believe that we'll be asked to make a decision. And so we will be coming back onto our streaming, and in fact, we will be making a decision coming out of camera. So I move that council, this is for the Cougar Creek contract negotiations, I move that council move in camera to prevent the interference with the town's contractual negotiations in accordance with section 25 sub 1 sub c sub 3, and also with regards to 27 sub 1 sub a of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. All of those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay. So we're going to have to ask for those who are not All right, we're back. We have just come out of an in-camera session with regards to the Cougar Creek debris retention structure project. And based on the briefing and advice received during that time, I will move that council direct administration to negotiate and execute a without cause termination, settlement, and release agreement respecting the contract with Flatiron Constructors Canada Ltd. Dated June 23, 2020, for the construction of the Cougar Creek debris flood retention structure, capital project 1562, and report back to council with a plan for project completion. Based on the advice we've received, I believe that this is the best way forward in order to have the project completed at the earliest possible opportunity. And so I will be voting in favor of this. Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I will now move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.